Deep beneath the shifting sands of Arabia's empty quarter lies a forgotten metropolis. For centuries, the legend of Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands, has haunted our imagination. Ancient texts spoke of a city of towering pillars and unimaginable wealth, a place so proud it was swallowed whole by the desert as a divine punishment. This is not just a fairy tale, it is one of history's greatest detective stories, a puzzle where the clues are written in ancient holy books, whispered in Bedouin campfires, and hidden in photographs taken from space. By the end of this journey, you will witness how myth, memory, and cutting-edge science finally converge to unearth a stunning truth. We will follow the trail from a verse in the Quran to a satellite image, and into the ruins of a fortress that holds the secret to a civilization's catastrophic end. What does it truly mean for an entire city to vanish, and what timeless warning might its stones still be trying to tell us? The legend of this lost city first emerges from the mists of time not as history, but as a stark moral lesson. Its most powerful and enduring mention is found within the Quran in Surah Al-Fajr. There it is called Iram of the Pillars, a magnificent city built by a people known as the Ad. The text describes a civilization of immense power and towering architecture, but one consumed by arrogance. They rejected the prophet sent to guide them, believing their own strength and wealth made them invincible. As a consequence, the story tells us they were utterly erased. The Quranic account is vivid and terrifying, a city silenced by a furious, relentless wind that blew for 7 nights and 8 days, leaving nothing behind. This was not merely a natural disaster, it was a divine punishment, a story told for generations to warn against the sin of hubris, but was it only a parable? Centuries later, the great Greek geographer Ptolemy would chart the known world, and on his maps of Arabia he marked a place called Ubar. This was not a city of myth, but a recorded location, a trading post. Then, of course, there are the tales of the Arabian Nights, where Iram is described as a city of towering columns built not by men, but by giants, a place of such splendor it defied belief. So we are left with a compelling contradiction. Is Ubar a spiritual allegory, a cautionary tale woven into scripture, or is it a real memory of a real place, its name and fate distorted and magnified by centuries of storytelling? The legend painted a picture of a place both magnificent and doomed, a destination of impossible wealth and a grave of catastrophic pride. This very duality is what would fuel the search for centuries, transforming it from a scholarly curiosity into an irresistible quest. For if even a grain of truth lay buried within those ancient words, then one of the world's greatest cities was waiting to be found. Yet the desert itself never forgot. While scholars debated ancient texts, a different kind of knowledge was being passed down around campfires for 1,000 years. The Bedouin, the nomadic people who have called the Rub al-Khali home for millennia, carried the story of Ubar not in books but in their oral traditions. To them, it was not a parable from a holy book, but a tangible memory etched into their landscape. They spoke of a great city that had vanished beneath the sands, a place of such ancient sin that the ground itself was cursed. Certain areas of the vast, trackless desert were avoided, considered haunted or treacherous, said to be where the old city lay. The very name Ubar, whispered among them, is thought to come from an old Arabic word meaning a well-trodden path or a caravan route. This is a crucial clue. It suggests the city's true identity was not as a city of mythical pillars, but as a vital hub, a crossroads where countless camel caravans once converged. The Bedouin stories gave the legend a location, a feeling. They transformed Ubar from an abstract moral lesson into a specific, if elusive, destination. For any explorer brave enough to listen, these whispers were a map drawn not on parchment but in memory. They pointed the way, confirming that the search was not a wild fantasy, but a pursuit of something real, a truth buried in the very sands that the Bedouin navigated by instinct and tradition. The quest was no longer confined to libraries. It was alive, waiting in the deep desert. The whispers of the Bedouin could only guide a search so far. To find a city lost for millennia, you needed more than stories. You needed a map. And the first serious attempts to draw one came not from archaeologists, but from explorers who ventured into the Rub al-Khali with little more than courage and curiosity. In the early 1930s, British explorer Bertram Thomas became the first Westerner to successfully cross the vast empty quarter. His journey was a feat of endurance, but his most valuable cargo was not supplies. It was the knowledge shared by his Bedouin guides. As they navigated the monstrous dunes, they told him of the lost city of Ubar. They spoke of a great road, an ancient frankincense trade route that led directly to its ruins. Thomas was captivated. He even identified what he believed was a section of this old road, a track worn deep into the desert floor by countless camel caravans over centuries. He theorized that Ubar was not just a city, but a critical hub in the ancient frankincense trade, a network that moved the precious resin from southern Arabia to the empires of Rome and Persia. His reports brought the legend into the realm of geographical inquiry. He provided a plausible reason for a city to exist in such a hostile place and a tragic reason for it to fall. If Ubar controlled the wells along these vital routes, its sudden disappearance would have been a catastrophic economic collapse. Around the same time, another legendary figure was dreaming of Ubar. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, was utterly obsessed with finding the fabled city. He called it the Atlantis of the sands, a name that would stick forever. For Lawrence, it was the ultimate archaeological prize, a mystery that combined his love for the Arab world with his thirst for adventure. He planned expeditions, pored over maps, and believed it was the key to understanding pre-Islamic Arabia. Tragically, he died in a motorcycle accident before he could launch his search. These early adventurers, Thomas with his gathered clues and Lawrence with his burning obsession, transformed Ubar from a campfire story into a tangible historical puzzle. They laid the intellectual groundwork, framing the right questions. Where were the trade routes? Where would the wells have been? But the Rub al-Khali is larger than France. Looking for a city's bones in such an ocean of sand was like searching for a single, specific grain of rice. They had the will and they had the theories, but they lacked the eyes. The mystery would remain frozen for decades, waiting for a technology that could see through the sand itself. The search for Ubar was a story trapped between legend and sand, waiting for a new kind of vision. That vision would arrive not from a desert explorer, but from orbit. In the 1980s, a space archaeologist named Dr. Juris Zarins began looking at Arabia in a way no one ever had before. He was not studying old maps, but new ones created by the eyes of machines floating high above the Earth. Zarins was working with imagery from NASA, Landsat satellites, and data from the United States Space Shuttle program. These satellites carried a powerful secret, a type of radar that could do something miraculous. It could see through the dry, loose surface sand of the desert, penetrating several meters deep to reveal the harder, compacted ground beneath. Think of it like an X-ray for the Earth's skin. What Zarins saw on those images was breathtaking. Etched into the hidden landscape were faint, ghostly lines. They were not random. They were ancient roads, the fossilized footpaths of countless camel caravans that had traveled those routes over 2,000 years ago. These tracks, invisible to anyone standing on the ground, told a clear story of movement and commerce, and they all told the same story. Like delicate threads drawn by a giant hand, these ancient trails did not wander aimlessly. They converged from all across the southern edge of the Rub al-Khali, from the mountains where frankincense trees grew. These paths came together, merging into a single, undeniable funnel. And at the narrow end of that funnel was one specific, remote spot in the Omani desert. It was a location so barren and inaccessible it had no modern name. The satellite evidence was cold, hard, and scientific. It did not speak of giants or divine punishment. It spoke of traffic, of logistics, of a nexus point. This was the first tangible, technological proof that the Bedouin stories and the explorers' hunches were correct. Something monumental had once stood there. Not just a watering hole or a small fort, but a major hub, a place where the wealth of an entire trade network gathered before moving north. The stars, in a very real sense, had finally drawn a map. And at the end of that map was a single, burning question. What remained of the hub that all those ancient roads had led to? Armed with a map drawn from space, the hunt for a physical city could finally begin. The man who had seen the converging roads from orbit, Dr. Joris Zarins, now had to lead a team to the ground zero of his satellite data. He partnered with filmmaker and adventurer Nicholas Clapp, whose own fascination with Ubar was ignited by reading the accounts of Bertram Thomas and Lawrence of Arabia. Together, they assembled a remarkable expedition, a fusion of 21st century science and timeless desert grit. Funding came partly from documentary filmmakers who saw the potent drama in a search for the Atlantis of the sands. This created a unique team, one where archaeologists, geologists, and surveyors worked alongside camera crews, all united by a single, burning question. Their destination was the pinpoint on the satellite image, a place so remote it was known only by its regional name, Chisur. Getting there was a monumental challenge in itself. The Rub al Khali is not a gentle desert, it is a brutal, beautiful, and empty wilderness. Temperatures soar past 120 degrees Fahrenheit. There are no roads, no water, and no landmarks except endless waves of sand. The team had to transport tons of equipment, tents, food, and water across this sea of dunes using a convoy of rugged four-wheel drive vehicles, guided by Bedouin scouts whose knowledge of the desert was their most vital technology. The team itself reflected the multifaceted nature of the quest. Alongside Zarins, the archaeologist, were experts who could read the soil and stone, and critically, Bedouin crew members who provided not just labor, but an intuitive understanding of the land. They could spot subtle changes in the terrain, interpret the wind, and find paths where none seemed to exist. This was the expedition's great strength, a perfect blend of the old and the new. They arrived with the precise coordinates from space, but they would walk the ground with the wisdom of the people who had never forgotten the stories. As they set up camp in the desolate silence of Chisur, the air was thick with anticipation. They had the map from the stars. Now they had to see if the Earth would give up its secret. The ground at Chisur held its secrets under a thin, deceptive crust. At first glance, it was just more desert, a flat expanse of gravel and wind-blown dust. But the team's careful surveys told a different story. Their probes and trowels soon scraped against something hard, something that was not natural bedrock. They began to clear the surface and shapes emerged from the earth. Not the scattered stones of a forgotten camp, but lines, deliberate and strong. They were the foundations of massive walls that formed a rough square. And at one corner, something extraordinary came into focus, a large octagonal tower. This was no simple outpost. The scale was immediately apparent. These were the remains of a substantial fortress, a statement in stone built to command and control. With each brushstroke that cleared the sand, the legend of the City of Towers began to shed its mythical skin and take on a stunning, tangible form. Here was a tower just as the ancient tales had described. The structure spoke of power, of a people who had invested enormous effort to build a permanent, imposing stronghold in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The very existence of such a fortress answered a fundamental question. It proved this was a place of immense strategic value. Someone had gone to great lengths to defend it. But what were they defending? The walls and the tower were the bones of the story, but the real narrative, the life of the place, would be found in the smaller, quieter things left behind. The grand architecture confirmed the location's importance, but the true character of Ubar, its daily rhythm and its ultimate fate, lay buried in the dust at their feet. The fortress rose from the desert floor like a clenched fist. The team's excavations revealed a structure roughly 100 feet on each side, its corners oriented to the cardinal points, a deliberate design that spoke of planning and power. But the true genius of its location was not just about the walls above, it was about the void below. The entire complex was built directly atop a massive, natural limestone cavern. This was the fortress's secret heart and the reason for its existence. In a land where water was more precious than gold, this cavern acted as a natural cistern, collecting and holding the rare rainwater that fell in the region. The people of Ubar had not built a city and then found a well. They had found this geological lifeline and built their entire world around it. Their towering walls were not just for show, they were the guardians of survival itself. The main entrance was a formidable gatehouse, a bottleneck designed to control all movement in and out. Anyone approaching would have been funneled into a narrow passage, exposed and vulnerable before being allowed into the inner sanctum. Inside the walls, the layout pointed to a bustling, organized community. There were clear residential quarters, storage rooms, and open courtyards where the daily life of trade and administration would have pulsed. Artifacts found here, from grinding stones to pottery shards, whispered of meals prepared, goods measured, and treaties signed. This was no temporary camp. It was a permanent, heavily defended command center. Every aspect of its architecture, from the thickness of its walls to the strategic placement of its single gate, sent a clear message to any caravan approaching from the empty horizon. We control the water, we control the road, you need what we have. The fortress of Ubar was less a city of mythical towers and more a brutal, brilliant machine for controlling the most valuable commodity in the desert, a machine built directly over the source of its own power. But a fortress, no matter how strong, is only as secure as the ground it stands on. The scale of the ruins told a surprising story. This was not the sprawling, populous capital of legend, not an Arabian Rome with endless streets and crowded neighborhoods. Instead, the fortress at Shisar pointed to a different, far more practical reality. Archaeologists began to see it not as a mythical city, but as something equally vital to the ancient world, a caravanserai. Imagine a massive, fortified truck stop in the middle of an ocean of sand. That was its purpose, for the endless camel caravans hauling precious frankincense and myrrh northward. This place was not just a destination, it was a lifeline. After weeks of brutal travel across the empty quarter, the caravans would arrive here, a pre-arranged oasis of safety. Within these high walls, they would find the three things they desperately needed: water from the deep cavern, secure rest for the night, and a place to conduct business. Traders could barter, repair their gear, and gather supplies for the next leg of their journey. The fortress was not a city where people were born, lived, and died for generations. It was a machine for commerce, a critical node in a vast economic network. This reinterpretation changes everything. Ubar was not a lost capital of a forgotten kingdom. It was the heart of a pump, the vital valve that kept the lifeblood of the incense trade flowing between southern Arabia and the civilizations of the Mediterranean. Its wealth came not from mines or agriculture, but from its location. It profited from every single caravan that passed through its gates. This makes its existence not less impressive, but more so. It was a specialized strategic operation, a fortress built for one reason: to control and profit from the most valuable trade route of its age. The legend spoke of towers reaching for the heavens, but the truth was perhaps even more compelling: a fortress whose power was drawn directly from the earth and the routes that crossed it. To understand the power this fortress held, you must first understand the treasure it controlled. The wealth of Ubar was not mined from the earth, but wept from the bark of small, unassuming trees. In the rugged Dhofar Mountains of southern Oman and the remote valleys of Yemen, the boswellia tree produces a precious resin known as frankincense. When its bark is carefully scored, the tree bleeds a milky sap that hardens into golden tears upon contact with the air. This was not a casual harvest, it was a skilled, sacred craft passed down through generations. The same mountains gave the world myrrh, a similar resin from the commiphora tree, valued for its fragrance and medicinal properties. In our modern world, it is difficult to grasp just how valuable these hardened tears were. In the ancient empires of Egypt, Rome, and Persia, frankincense was not a luxury, it was a necessity. It was the very scent of the divine. Temples across the Mediterranean burned it continuously, believing the thick, sweet smoke carried prayers directly to the gods. It was a key ingredient in medicines and perfumes. For the Egyptians, it was essential for the embalming process, a critical step on the journey to the afterlife. Its value by weight was comparable to gold. This created an economic engine of staggering scale. But between the mountain groves where it was harvested and the distant temples where it was burned lay an almost impossible barrier, the vast, waterless prison of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. Moving this treasure required a feat of logistics and endurance that is hard to fathom. Caravans of thousands of camels, each animal carrying heavy loads of resin, would form. Their journey was a slow, punishing march under a relentless sun, navigating by the stars and ancient knowledge from one scarce water hole to the next. The risk of losing the entire caravan to thirst, bandits, or a simple wrong turn was constant. This is where Ubar's location transformed from a spot on a map into a source of immense power. It sat at a critical convergence point where several of these perilous desert tracks came together. For a caravan emerging from the deep desert, Shisur was not just another stop. It was salvation. Here, at last, was guaranteed water from the deep cavern, security behind high walls, and a place to trade and rest before the final push north to the markets of Gaza, Petra, and beyond. The fortress did not just offer a service, it controlled a choke point. Every ounce of incense that moved from south to north likely passed through its gate, and its rulers would have levied taxes, tolls, and fees for protection. Ubar was the toll booth on the world's most valuable highway, a fortress built on the tears of trees and the desperation of men crossing an empty sea. But this fortress of commerce held a fatal flaw, one hidden directly beneath its foundations. The evidence of its end was not a slow fading, but a violent, sudden snap. As archaeologists cleared the final layers of sand at Shisur, they uncovered a scene of instant catastrophe. Walls had not simply crumbled from age, they had been violently thrown inward, as if a giant fist had punched upward from below. Rooms were found filled with debris, with artifacts of daily life, pottery, tools, even charcoal from cooking fires, buried exactly where they had been left. This was not a city abandoned, it was a place frozen in a single, terrible moment. The legend spoke of a city swallowed by the sand, but the truth was even more dramatic. It was swallowed by the earth itself. The very source of its life, the vast limestone cavern that provided its water, became the instrument of its destruction. Geologists studying the site put forward a compelling and tragic theory. For centuries, the people of Ubar had relied on that underground reservoir. They drew water from it, likely through a well shaft that reached down into the darkness. But limestone is soluble. Water slowly eats it away, creating ever larger cavities. The immense weight of the fortress walls and towers above, combined with the constant drawing of water that may have destabilized the cavern's roof, created a perfect storm of pressure. One day, without warning, the ground simply gave way. A massive sinkhole opened, a sudden collapse of the cavern ceiling. The fortress, built so proudly upon this hollow shell, had no chance. Sections of the wall and likely whole towers plummeted into the abyss, dragging the heart of the community down with them. In an instant, the toll booth of the desert was gone. The collapse provides a stunningly clear scientific explanation for the ancient myth. A city vanishing into the earth, leaving no survivors to tell the tale, perfectly matches the archaeological record. The divine punishment of a furious wind described in scripture finds its echo in the roar of collapsing stone and the implosion of the ground. The legend was not wrong, it was a poetic interpretation of a real geological disaster. The people who witnessed the aftermath, or who arrived to find only a gaping hole where a mighty fortress once stood, would have had only one way to explain such a complete and terrifying erasure. The earth had opened up and taken it. The city of towers did not just fall, it was consumed from within. The silence of the ruins held a final, crucial question: when did this happen? Dating the disaster was the key to placing Ubar's story into the grand sweep of history. Archaeologists turned to the very debris that entombed the fortress. Scattered among the collapsed stones were broken pieces of pottery, the everyday dishes and storage jars of the people who lived there. By analyzing the styles, the clay composition, and the manufacturing techniques of these shards, experts could match them to known pottery sequences from across the region. It was like finding a dated receipt in the wreckage. More precise evidence came from something even more telling: organic remains. Charcoal from the last cooking fires, bits of rope, and even date seeds found trapped in the destruction layer were subjected to radiocarbon dating. This scientific process measures the decay of a radioactive form of carbon in once living materials, providing a remarkably accurate clock. The results from these two methods converged on a sobering timeline. The catastrophic collapse of Ubar most likely occurred sometime between the years 300 and 500 AD. This is not a random span of centuries. It is a pivotal moment in world history, a period of profound transformation that reshaped continents. To the northwest, the mighty Roman Empire, one of the primary consumers of Arabian frankincense, was fracturing and in decline. Its economic power was waning, and with it, the insatiable demand for luxury goods that had fueled the incense trade for centuries. New sea routes were also emerging, offering safer and cheaper alternatives to the perilous desert caravans. This paints a poignant picture of Ubar's final days. The great sinkhole may have delivered the final, physical blow, but the fortress was likely already a fading star. Its economic reason for being, the torrent of wealth from the frankincense trade, was slowing to a trickle. The caravans would have been fewer, the gates less busy, the storerooms less full. Ubar was a giant built on a single industry, and when that industry faltered, the giant became vulnerable. The ground literally gave way beneath a society that was already crumbling from within. The collapse, then, was a double tragedy, a dramatic geological accident that sealed the fate of a place whose time had already passed. It was the perfect, terrible storm of economic change and geological destiny. The true soul of this place was not in its fallen walls, but in the small, forgotten things left behind in the dust. Amidst the rubble, archaeologists uncovered a silent marketplace of the ancient world. Their trowels brushed against fragments of fine Roman glass, delicate vessels that once held perfumes or precious oils, carried over 1,000 miles from the workshops of the Mediterranean. They found pottery shards stamped with styles from distant Mesopotamia, and others with designs echoing the ancient Indus Valley civilization. A handful of coins, worn smooth by countless hands, passed through the gates of Shisar. Simple tools for repairing camel gear, stone weights for measuring out precious resin, and even a few personal items like a broken comb or a bead from a necklace whispered of the people who passed through. These were not the treasures of a king's tomb. They were the artifacts of everyday life, the incidental debris of a busy, connected world. Each broken piece is a data point in a story of astonishing reach. That Roman glass did not get there by magic. It arrived on the back of a camel, part of a return load after a trader sold his frankincense in Gaza. The Mesopotamian pottery suggests merchants from the lands of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were regular visitors bringing goods from the east. These objects transformed the fortress from an isolated desert stronghold into a vibrant, cosmopolitan crossroads. Imagine the scene within those walls at the height of the season. The air thick with the scent of spices, animals, and burning incense. You would hear a cacophony of languages, Aramaic from the north, early Arabic dialects, perhaps even Greek or Persian. Deals were struck using a mixture of coins, bartered goods, and promises. A trader from Petra might be mending a saddle next to a caravan master from southern Arabia, while a merchant servant from Mesopotamia drew water from the well. This was globalization in the ancient world, a meeting point of empires and cultures, all made possible by the relentless demand for the tears of a tree. Every artifact, from the most elegant glass to the humblest clay weight, is a testament to a single, powerful fact. Shisar was not a lonely outpost at the edge of nothing. It was a vital pin on the map of the ancient world, a humming node in a network that stretched from the mountains of Oman to the forums of Rome. The stones spoke of power, but these small, intimate objects speak of life, connection, and the vast, intricate web of trade that once pulsed through the heart of the desert. The fortress at Shisar was a monument built not on rock but on water. Every stone in its walls, every decision made within its gates, was a direct response to the single, desperate need that defines the empty quarter. In a landscape where rain might fall once a decade, the settlement's entire existence hinged on a geological accident deep below the surface. The foundation of the fortress was a massive, natural limestone cavern. Over eons, slightly acidic rainwater had seeped through the ground, slowly dissolving the soft rock and carving out a hidden reservoir. This was not a small pocket, but a vast underground cistern, a secret lake locked in stone. It was the sole reason anyone could survive at this remote crossroads. The cavern collected the rare, precious rainfall that filtered down through the sand and gravel, storing it in a cool, dark sanctuary safe from the evaporating sun above. The people of Ubar did not just find water here, they built their entire world atop its only source. This was the ultimate power, the source of their sovereignty in the sand. Without this hidden aquifer, the grandest fortress would have been nothing more than a tomb of stone, a monument to futility in the endless dunes. Their control over this well was the control over life itself for every soul and every camel that dared to cross that sea of sand. Accessing this buried treasure required ingenuity and constant effort. Archaeologists believe the inhabitants would have dug a deep well shaft straight down from inside the fortress walls, penetrating the ceiling of the cavern to reach the water table below. This was no simple hole in the ground. It was a feat of engineering, likely lined with stone to prevent collapse and equipped with a pulley system. Imagine the daily rhythm, the sound of a heavy bucket scraping against stone as it was lowered dozens of feet into the darkness, then hauled back up, sloshing with liquid more valuable than any spice. Guarding this well would have been a paramount duty. It was the fortress's beating heart, and its security was absolute. No caravan could enter without permission, and no one drank without the consent of those who controlled the gate. This command over the water source translated directly into economic and political power. They could charge exorbitant tolls for its use, demand trade concessions, or deny it altogether to rivals. The well was the ultimate lever, and the rulers of Ubar held it firmly. Every transaction, every alliance, every moment of life within those walls flowed from that single, dark shaft reaching into the earth. This dependence on the cavern made the community profoundly vulnerable. The very geology that gave them life was inherently unstable. Limestone continues to dissolve over time, especially when water is constantly being removed, which can alter pressure and flow within the rock. The immense weight of the fortress above, with its towers and thick walls, added a constant, heavy stress to the cavern's roof. For generations, perhaps centuries, the structure held. The people maintained their well, drew their life-giving water, and grew confident in their dominion over the desert. They had no way of knowing they were living on a slowly weakening shell. Then, in one cataclysmic moment, the balance failed. the ceiling of the cavern, stressed beyond its limit, gave way. It was not a slow sinking, but a sudden, violent collapse. The ground literally opened up. Sections of the fortress walls, the mighty gatehouse, and likely the well structure itself were swallowed whole, plummeting into the newly created abyss. The water that had sustained them was either buried under tons of rubble or drained away into deeper fissures. In an instant, the reason for the city's existence was gone. The collapse was more than a structural disaster, it was an existential erasure. The community lost its foundation, its purpose, and its only source of life in the most literal way possible. The desert, which they had believed they commanded, had reclaimed its ultimate authority. Yet the discovery at Shisur, for all its compelling evidence, did not end the debate. In fact, it ignited a new one. For every scholar convinced the mystery was solved, another raised a skeptical hand. Is this fortress truly the legendary Ubar, or have we simply found a different, important place and given it the most famous name we know? The controversy is not about whether Shisur is significant, it clearly was. The debate is about whether it matches the scale and the myth. Some argue the site is simply too small. The legends speak of a city of towering pillars, a grand capital. The fortress at Shisur, while impressive, is a single, fortified complex, not the ruins of a sprawling metropolis. Could a caravanserai, no matter how vital, truly inspire tales that lasted for millennia? Perhaps these critics suggest Ubar was not a single city at all, but a region, a kingdom, or a collective name for a network of trading centers. The name itself might refer to the broader territory controlled by the ancient Ad people, with Shisur being just one fortified stronghold within it. Other theories point to different locations entirely. Over the years, various explorers have proposed sites in modern-day Yemen or Saudi Arabia as the true location, places with larger ruins or geographical features that better match certain ancient descriptions. These alternative candidates often have their own compelling, if fragmentary, evidence. This intellectual tension is not a failure of archaeology, it is the very heart of historical detection. The past rarely surrenders a single, neat answer. Instead, it offers clues that we interpret, building stories from fragments. The team that found Shisur built a powerful case, a chain of evidence linking satellite imagery, Bedouin lore, trade routes, and a catastrophic collapse. Their interpretation is elegant and convincing, but absolute final proof, a stone tablet with the words "Welcome to Ubar" carved upon it, has not been found. And so the conversation continues. This ongoing debate reminds us that history is not a dusty list of settled facts. It is a living, breathing dialogue. Each new theory, each skeptical question pushes us to look deeper, to re-examine the evidence, and to better understand the blurred line where a real place ends and a legend begins. Perhaps the true identity of Ubar is less important than what the search for it reveals about our own desire to find truth in the echoes of myth. Perhaps the most intriguing alternative is that Ubar was never meant to be found because it was never a single place. Some historians propose that the name Ubar or Iram did not refer to a specific city, but to an entire civilization, a confederation of wealthy trading towns that dotted the incense routes. Think of it not as a pin on a map, but as a golden thread connecting a series of oases and forts. In this view, the legend is a collective memory of a whole culture, a network so prosperous and powerful that it became legendary in its own right. The City of Towers might then be a poetic simplification, a way for later storytellers to condense the glory of an entire trade district into one unforgettable image. This idea gains traction when you look at the geography. The journey from the frankincense groves to the Mediterranean was over 1,000 miles long. No single fortress could have controlled it all. It required a chain of way stations, each with its own water source and local rulers, all cooperating to keep the precious resin flowing. The fame of Ubar could have been the fame of the entire system, with Shisur being just one particularly important link in that chain. Its dramatic collapse would have resonated along the entire trade route, becoming the symbolic story for the end of an era. The legend, then, is not a map to a treasure but a eulogy for a lost way of life. Other scholars take this a step further into the realm of pure metaphor. They argue that the story of Iram of the pillars in the Quran is first and foremost a moral lesson, a parable about the dangers of arrogance and materialism. The city is a literary device, a symbol of human pride that reaches for the heavens only to be brought low. From this perspective, searching for its physical ruins is to misunderstand the story's purpose. It would be like archaeologists digging for the precise location of the prodigal son's farm. The power of the tale lies in its truth about human nature, not in the coordinates of its setting. This interpretation forces us to ask a profound question about how we engage with the past. When does a story become history, and when does history become a story? The legend of Ubar sits squarely in that ambiguous space, a narrative that has been shaped and polished by countless retellings across cultures and centuries. Each generation may have added its own details, its own towers and its own cataclysms to make the core warning more vivid and terrifying. This is the central complication of searching for a myth. Archaeology deals in stone and pottery, in carbon dates and soil layers. Myth operates on a different plane, in the landscape of memory and meaning. A legendary city is not just a collection of buildings, it is an idea. And ideas are fluid. They can attach themselves to different places, absorb elements from other stories, and grow larger than any single ruin could ever be. The true Ubar might be a composite, a palimpsest. It could be the memory of Shisur's collapse, blended with the grandeur of other, larger cities like Petra, or the lost capitals of the Minian or Sabaean kingdoms further south. It might be the echo of a real geological disaster that happened somewhere in the desert, whose story traveled along the trade routes, gathering details and moral weight until it found a permanent home in scripture and folklore. The physical evidence at Shisur is undeniable, a fortress that fell suddenly and perfectly fits the description of a punishment from the earth. But that does not necessarily mean it is the only place that contributed to the legend. The human mind is a master of synthesis. We take fragments of truth, moments of trauma, and glimpses of splendor, and we weave them into a single, powerful tale that explains the world. The search for Ubar, therefore, becomes a search for the seeds of that tale. Was it one mighty sinkhole, or was it the slow fading of the incense trade, felt as a catastrophe across 100 communities? The desert keeps its secrets close, allowing just enough evidence to surface to keep the mystery and the conversation forever alive. The desert's deepest truths are not written in stone but carried on the wind. While satellites provided the map, it was the Bedouin who held the compass. For the modern archaeological teams, the most critical partnership was not with their high-tech gear, but with the local guides whose families had traversed this emptiness for 1,000 years. These men were not simply hired hands, they were the living librarians of a landscape without books. Their knowledge was not academic, it was ancestral, a tactile memory passed down through generations around fires under countless stars. They knew which dune formations signaled a hidden well beneath the sand, which wadis held water after a rare rain, and which areas were considered taboo, places where the old stories warned of a deep and ancient loss. When the scientists arrived with their coordinates and questions, it was the Bedouin who could translate those digital points into a path a vehicle could follow. They could look at a featureless expanse and see the story the land was telling. One guide, whose name is often remembered in expedition accounts, pointed to a specific, unremarkable patch of desert and said simply that this was the place the Old Ones spoke of. He was not referring to a map, but to a lineage of whispers, to a cautionary tale told by his grandfather about a great city that angered God and was taken back by the sand. His certainty was not born of data, but of a deep cultural intimacy with the very idea of Ubar. For him, the legend was a real event that shaped the moral and physical geography of his world. To stand with him at Shisar was to stand at the intersection of two entirely different ways of knowing. The validation that came from the excavation was profound on a human level that transcended archaeology. When the first walls were uncovered, when the pattern of the fortress emerged from the dust, it was not just a victory for science. It was a vindication of an oral tradition that had been dismissed by outsiders as mere folklore for centuries. The Bedouin guides watched as shovels and brushes confirmed what their poetry and warnings had always held to be true. Their stories were not myths, they were memories, encoded and preserved with remarkable accuracy across dozens of generations. This created a powerful, respectful bridge. The scientists gained an irreplaceable key to the landscape, while the Bedouin saw their heritage acknowledged and woven into the global historical narrative. They were not passive informants, they were active collaborators, the true keepers of the desert's secrets who chose, at that moment, to share them. This partnership underscores a vital truth about uncovering the past. The most advanced technology in the world is useless without the human wisdom that knows how to listen to the land. The lost city was found not because we finally looked, but because we finally learned who to ask. The legend of Ubar refused to stay buried in the sand. Its powerful themes of pride, punishment, and a magnificent ruin waiting in a forbidden desert proved irresistible to storytellers, launching it from ancient texts into the heart of modern popular culture. One of its most famous admirers was the master of cosmic horror, H.P. Lovecraft. In his 1936 novella, At the Mountains of Madness, he sends a doomed Antarctic expedition to a Cyclopean city built by alien beings. While not a direct copy, the eerie parallels are unmistakable. An ancient, advanced civilization meeting a sudden, catastrophic end, leaving only monstrous ruins as a warning. Lovecraft tapped into the same primal fear that the Ubar myth embodies, the terrifying idea that humanity is not the master of this world, but a temporary tenant on ground that can literally open up and swallow us whole. The legend's journey did not stop there. It found a spectacular new home in the blockbuster Uncharted video game series. In Uncharted 3: Drake's Deception, protagonist Nathan Drake follows the trail of T.E. Lawrence himself to find the Atlantis of the Sand. The game brilliantly translates the core elements of the myth into an interactive adventure, complete with a lost city buried in the Rub al-Khali, ancient traps, and a climactic revelation in a vast underground cavern. For millions of players, this was their introduction to Ubar, not as a historical footnote, but as a tangible, explorable destination full of danger and wonder. Beyond fiction, the mystery has fueled countless documentary films and television specials, each retracing the steps of explorers and archaeologists, trying to separate fact from fable for a new audience. This persistent appeal begs the question, why does this specific lost city trope, one centered on a dramatic divine punishment, grip us so tightly? The answer lies in a perfect storm of narrative ingredients. First, it offers a clean, moral equation. A civilization's arrogance is met with an earth-shattering consequence. This provides a satisfying, if terrifying, sense of cosmic justice. Second, it combines the allure of treasure with the thrill of a cautionary tale. We are drawn to the imagined towers and wealth, but we also secretly fear we might deserve the same fate, making the story feel personally resonant. Finally, it validates a deep human curiosity about emptiness. A blank space on a map is an invitation, and a story that says here there was greatness, and now there is nothing is the ultimate challenge to our imagination. Ubar's true power is that it lives in two worlds at once, as a physical puzzle for scientists and as a timeless story about the limits of human ambition. As long as we are fascinated by ruins and haunted by the idea of our own fragility, the Atlantis of the sands will never truly be lost, but the search for what lies hidden does not end with a single discovery. The technology that first spotted Shissa's ghostly roads from space was only the beginning. Today, the tools of desert archaeology are evolving at a breathtaking pace, moving from orbit down to the very surface of the sand. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, is like giving the Earth an ultrasound. Archaeologists tow a small sled across the desert floor, and it sends pulses of energy into the ground. When those pulses hit something solid, like a buried wall or a compacted floor, they bounce back to a receiver. The result is a detailed, cross-sectional image of what lies beneath, revealing foundations, tombs, or even ancient pathways without ever lifting a shovel. It allows researchers to map an entire site's layout before they commit to a single, potentially destructive excavation. Then there is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. When mounted on a drone flying a precise grid pattern over a site, it fires millions of laser pulses at the ground. By measuring how long each pulse takes to bounce back, it builds an astonishingly precise three-dimensional map of the surface topography. This technology can detect incredibly subtle variations, the faint rise of a collapsed wall barely visible to the human eye, or the gentle depression of an ancient irrigation channel long since filled with wind-blown silt. These digital models are more than just maps, they are virtual time machines. Archaeologists can rotate them, zoom in, and analyze patterns from every angle, sometimes discovering alignments and structures that are impossible to see from the ground. 3D modeling software then takes this data further, allowing for the virtual reconstruction of how a site like Shissa might have looked at its peak, with towers standing and gates intact, bringing the dusty ruins vividly back to life. So what could these tools reveal about the empty quarter's deeper secrets? The future is extraordinarily promising. A systematic LiDAR survey of the areas around Shissa could finally answer a lingering question: was the fortress truly alone? It might reveal a scatter of smaller satellite settlements, outposts, or caravan resting spots that supported the main hub, painting a picture of a populated district rather than a solitary sentinel. Ground-penetrating radar could be deployed across the wider convergence zone of those ancient roads, searching for other, as yet unknown, way stations that controlled different legs of the journey. Perhaps the true Ubar was not one city, but a constellation of them, and we have only found the brightest star. These technologies offer a respectful, meticulous way to listen to the desert. They allow us to ask new questions of an ancient landscape without disturbing its fragile peace, to search for the echoes of other lost conversations that still whisper just beneath the sand. The story of Ubar's fall is not locked in the past. It echoes forward as a stark lesson written in stone and sand. This was a civilization, or at least a powerful community, that built its entire existence on a single, fragile resource, a hidden water cavern. For generations, they thrived by controlling it, drawing from it, and leveraging its life-giving power, but their dependence was also their vulnerability. While the final trigger was a sudden geological collapse, we have to ask a deeper question: could their own actions have made that collapse more likely? Imagine the constant, heavy draw of water for hundreds of people and thousands of camels over centuries. Every bucket hauled up from the depths potentially altered the delicate hydrostatic balance within the limestone. Removing vast quantities of water can destabilize the very rock formations that hold it, creating voids and increasing stress on the cavern roof. It is a haunting possibility that the people of Ubar, in securing their daily survival, may have been slowly, unknowingly undermining the foundation of their entire world. They were not malicious, they were simply doing what any society does, using the resource that made their lives possible. But in an environment as extreme as the empty quarter, there is no margin for error. Their story transforms from a simple tale of disaster into a profound parable about sustainability. It illustrates a brutal truth: a society can be extraordinarily sophisticated in its architecture and trade, yet blind to the ecological limits of its own home. Ubar's towers did not reach for the heavens because of arrogance alone. They fell because the ground beneath them could no longer bear the weight of their need. This ancient warning resonates with uncomfortable clarity today. We see modern parallels everywhere: in aquifer depletion, in sinking cities, in the overuse of any critical, non-renewable resource. The principle is the same: building a grand future on a foundation that is being consumed. Ubar's ruins are a monument to a specific moment when the balance failed, but they stand as a universal symbol. They remind us that the most formidable walls cannot protect against a threat that comes from below, from the very resource we believe we control. The desert swallowed a city not out of malice, but as a consequence of physics and human demand. In listening to that echo from the past, we are forced to look at our own world. What hidden caverns are we drawing from too deeply, and what ground, literal or metaphorical, are we standing on that might one day give way? The mystery of Ubar is solved, but its question remains, hanging in the dry desert air for every generation to answer anew. The hunt for Ubar did more than unearth a fortress. It fundamentally reshaped how we search for lost worlds. Before those satellite images revealed the ghost roads of the Rub al-Khali, archaeology was often a matter of educated guesswork and painstaking ground-level surveys. The Ubar project proved in a stunningly public way that the view from space could be a game-changer. It demonstrated that remote sensing was not just a theoretical tool for scientists, but a practical key to unlocking the past on a continental scale. Suddenly, entire landscapes could be scanned for subtle, human-made patterns invisible from the ground, patterns like ancient roads, buried irrigation canals, or the faint outlines of settlements long since erased by time. This success turned a niche method into a standard part of the archaeological toolkit, opening up new frontiers in deserts, jungles, and other remote regions where secrets had been stubbornly guarded by geography. The discovery popularized the very idea of space archaeology, capturing the public imagination with the powerful romance of using 21st-century orbital technology to solve thousand-year-old mysteries. It inspired a generation of researchers to think bigger and look wider, to see that the next great discovery might not be under the next shovel of dirt, but hidden in plain sight on a digital map. More importantly, the Ubar quest became a blueprint for a new kind of historical detective work. It was a masterclass in multidisciplinary synthesis. Here was a puzzle that could not be solved by any single field. It required the orbital eyes of NASA, the scholarly analysis of ancient texts, the boots-on-the-ground grit of traditional excavation, and most critically, the living, breathing knowledge of the Bedouin guides. This fusion of high-tech and deep tradition, of satellite data and campfire stories, showed that the most complete truths are found at the intersection of different ways of knowing. The legacy of Ubar is not just a pile of stones in the desert. It is a powerful reminder that the past is a complex tapestry, and to see the whole picture, you need every thread you can gather, from the silicon of a satellite sensor to the ancient wisdom whispered on the wind. Yet even with its walls uncovered, Shisar holds onto its deepest secrets. The discovery solved the central riddle of location and catastrophe, but in doing so, it illuminated new, shadowy corners of the mystery. If this fortress was a vital, permanent hub, where did its people actually live? The structure itself has rooms, but they feel administrative, built for storage, security, and commerce. For a community that thrived for centuries, we would expect to find the sprawl of a town outside the walls, the remains of homes, workshops, and community spaces where generations of families lived their daily lives. So far, that residential footprint has eluded detection. Was it built from more perishable materials like mud brick that simply melted back into the desert? Or does it lie buried under dunes that have marched across the landscape in the centuries since the collapse, waiting for a future survey to reveal its outline? This absence raises a fascinating possibility. Perhaps the permanent population was always small, a ruling elite, guards, and key administrators, while the vast majority of the city's life was transient, the endless ebb and flow of caravan crews who slept in tents outside the gates or in barracks within only for a night before moving on. The fortress then becomes not a city in the traditional sense, but a specialized machine operated by a skeleton crew. Its true population counted in the thousands who passed through, not the hundreds who stayed. This leads directly to the next unanswered question. Was Shisar truly alone? It seems improbable that such a critical node existed in total isolation. Logic suggests there must have been satellite settlements, smaller way stations a day's journey out along each major trade track, places to rest animals and make minor repairs before the final push to the main well. There could have been outlying guard posts or even camps for the workers who maintain the roads and manage the local environment. The desert is a master of concealment. These supporting sites, likely far more modest than the Grand Fortress, could be completely buried or so eroded as to be nearly invisible. Finding them would require meticulously surveying the ancient road network radiating from Shisar, a task for future technologies and patient explorers. Finally, what was the true reach of the network centered here? The artifacts tell a story of connections to Rome and Mesopotamia, but were they direct or handled through a chain of middlemen? How deeply did the influence of this desert command post extend into the politics of southern Arabia's incense-producing kingdoms? Did the rulers of Shisar simply collect tolls, or did they wield genuine political power, negotiating treaties and influencing the flow of goods across the peninsula? The stones are silent on these matters of diplomacy and soft power. Each of these lingering questions is a gift, not a failure. They are the natural and thrilling consequence of a major discovery. Archaeology rarely delivers a full stop, only a series of ellipses. Every answer peels back a layer, revealing a more complex and intriguing reality beneath. The fortress at Shisar is not the end of the story of Ubar. It is a magnificent new beginning, a solid foundation from which we can now ask better, sharper questions of the empty, waiting sands. To stand at Shisar today is to feel the weight of a mystery made real. You do not find a sprawling cityscape but a profound and silent footprint in the desert. The journey there is part of the experience, a long drive across a gravel plain under an immense sky, the horizon broken only by the distant, hazy line of dunes. As you approach, the first thing you see is a modern, white geodesic dome, a startling sight against the ancient, rust-colored earth. This protective shell was built by the Omani government to shelter the heart of the excavation, the gaping maw of the sinkhole itself. Step inside its shaded interior and the air changes. You are looking directly into the wound that consumed the fortress. The collapsed walls are visible, tumbling down into the darkness where the cavern once held water. It is a humbling sight, a geological scar that makes the legend viscerally immediate. Around the main dome, low metal railings guide you along paths that trace the outlines of the fortress walls, now just foundations of stone rising a few courses high. Interpretive signs in Arabic and English tell the story in brief, explaining the trade routes, the collapse, and the modern discovery. But perhaps the most powerful impact comes from what is not there. There is no gift shop, no cafe, no crowds. The silence is absolute, broken only by the wind whispering across the gravel. You are standing in a place of stark, almost severe beauty, where the past feels incredibly close because the present is so still. This remoteness is both its magic and its greatest protection. Tourism here is a delicate, managed affair. The site is fragile and the environment is brutally harsh. The Omani authorities have made a conscious choice to prioritize preservation over promotion. access requires planning, a suitable vehicle, and respect for the desert's dangers. There are no paved roads right to the site, and visitors are expected to be self-sufficient. This deliberate inaccessibility acts as a filter, ensuring that those who make the pilgrimage are genuinely engaged with the story. It prevents the kind of mass tourism that could erode the very stones that tell the tale. The dome is not just a shelter, it is a statement, a commitment to holding this piece of history in trust. To walk these paths is to participate in a quiet contract with the past, to witness a truth that is more compelling than any myth, and to understand that some discoveries are too important to be easily owned. They must simply be visited with awe and left exactly as they are for the wind and the next curious mind. There is a deep, almost primal pull that draws us toward these empty places. Why does the idea of a lost city resonate so powerfully across centuries and cultures? Perhaps it begins with the oldest story we know, the story of a fall. Ubar, Atlantis, El Dorado, even the legendary Troy before it was found, they all share a common, haunting theme: hubris and its inevitable punishment. These are not just tales of disaster, they are moral dramas on an epic scale. They tell us that civilizations, no matter how grand, are not permanent. They can be brought low by their own pride, by greed, or by a simple failure to respect the natural world that sustains them. This narrative satisfies a deep need for cosmic justice. It warns us about the limits of our own ambition, making the crumbling stones of Ubar feel like a mirror held up to our modern world. We look at our own towering cities and wonder what unseen flaw lies beneath our foundations. The lost city becomes a cautionary symbol, a reminder that our greatest achievements are fragile. Then there is the undeniable romance of the treasure hunt. It is not merely about gold, though that is often part of the legend. It is about the treasure of the unknown. An empty space on a map is an irresistible invitation to the human imagination. It whispers that there is still something left to find, a secret the world has kept. This is the allure that drove explorers into unmapped jungles and across trackless deserts. The possibility that you might be the first person in 1,000 years to lay eyes on a forgotten temple, to decipher a lost language, to solve a puzzle that has baffled generations. It is the ultimate adventure, combining the thrill of discovery with the intellectual satisfaction of solving a mystery. Ubar's story is a perfect example, blending a verse from scripture with a Bedouin campfire tale and a satellite image into a single, solvable clue. That journey from myth to map is a narrative we find endlessly compelling. Beyond the moral lesson and the treasure, there is a profound desire to recover what was forgotten. Every lost city represents a gap in the story of us. What knowledge did they possess? What art did they create? What understanding of the stars or medicine or engineering vanished when they fell? Finding Troy was not just about proving a poet right, it was about touching the reality of the Bronze Age. Uncovering Ubar rewrote our understanding of Arabian trade networks, giving names and places to what were once just lines on Ptolemy's ancient charts. These discoveries are acts of reclamation. They pull fragments of our shared human heritage back from the void. They tell us that even when a society collapses completely, its memory, its influence, might still be waiting beneath the sand or the soil, ready to speak again. This drive to recover lost knowledge is a drive to make ourselves whole, to fill in the blank pages of our own history. Ultimately, these stories are fundamental because they are about hope and humility in equal measure. They feed our hope that the world still holds wonders beyond the edge of the known, and they instill a humility, reminding us that our chapter in the story is just that, a chapter. The silent fortress in the Omani desert does more than mark a location. It asks a question that every generation must answer for itself. What are we building, and upon what ground does it truly stand? So the desert finally gave up its secret, not as a city of mythical pillars, but as a fortress of stone and strategy. We began with a verse in the Quran, a haunting story of a proud people erased by a furious wind. We followed the whispers of Bedouin guides around ancient campfires and the dreams of explorers like Lawrence of Arabia who saw a ghost in the sands. The trail led to the stars themselves, to satellite eyes that saw ancient roads converging on a single remote point. And on the ground at that very spot, the earth yielded the truth, a massive caravanserai built over a water-filled cavern, its walls thrown down in a single catastrophic collapse. The literal city of towers with its giants and endless streets may have been a legendary exaggeration, a story magnified by centuries of telling, but what we found is, in its own way, more compelling. It was a real place of immense power and wealth, a choke point on the world's most valuable trade route, whose sudden and complete destruction was so shocking, so absolute, that it could only be explained as a divine punishment. Its real story was dramatic enough to become myth. This is the beautiful, tangled knot where history, memory, and science finally meet. The legend was not a lie, it was a different kind of truth, a poetic memory of a real catastrophe that echoed down the ages. It reminds us that our past is not a simple collection of facts, but a story we are always piecing together, using every tool we have, from holy books to orbital radar. What other echoes from lost worlds are waiting in the silence, halfway between memory and discovery? Let us know which historical mystery captures your imagination in the comments below.